All right. So welcome everyone to the last day of the Mountain Moot. Thanks for showing up for our first session of the day. Today we have Ben Cass, who's going to be presenting on how eThink and TechTrep are using multi-tenancy to support STEM education. Take it away, Ben.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, I'm going to share. I'll share. Hopefully, I'm sharing my screen, but I'm also just going to quickly say hello on video as well, so everybody can see who we are. But essentially, throughout this presentation, feel free to just drop questions into the chat pane, and we'll obviously anything around the case study itself, or even Moodle Workplace in general, and we'll try and go through them at the end. So if you've got general questions, feel free to drop them in there, or wait while the end and obviously ask them. But as Jeff says, I'm Ben Cass. I'm one of the customer solution architects here at eThink. As you can tell by my accent, I am actually based in the United Kingdom. I'm part of the United Kingdom team. But in terms of eThink, we are a global organization. We have offices in different countries. We have workers, employees in different countries, and we work with multiple clients across all those different sectors as well. But if I just give you, today we're really going to talk about TechTrep, and I thought it would be good before we moved on to the case study, just for you to understand who TechTrep are and what they actually do. So essentially TechTrep are based in the United States, and they provide, as it says there, a comprehensive, affordable and sustainable STEM, CTE and entrepreneurial program for kids, which basically means that they provide their STEM platform to district schools, charter schools, private schools, even homeschoolers as well. And basically any organization that really does offer out STEM education, such as YMCA clubs, public libraries, anything along those lines. And essentially it's about getting or mitigating the risk of children not being able to have some form of STEM education, and meets the sort of gap where there may not be STEM specific teachers within those organizations. Oh, I've gone too far. So TechTrep provide like a comprehensive catalog of project-based skills and activities, along with self-paced activities as well, to really personalize their STEM courses and make it really ideal for anybody to sort of partner with them in order to provide those educations. They provide things like lesson plans and all kinds of things that essentially allow somebody that may not be in the field of STEM but has the ability to obviously deliver that to those children. So let's have a look at their challenges. So TechTrep came across to eThink with a number of issues with their current provider. And one of the main features was the fact that they had no multi-tenancy capabilities. And this basically meant that they were unable to do things like delegating access down to the schools and organizations, which meant they had to do a lot of that administrative work centrally, which obviously gave them a lot of admin work themselves that they could usually or would like to have given down to the individual organization. They had no ability really to brand their site. So every client that they worked with, or every school, essentially had the same look and feel. They had no way of personalizing things with logos or colors or anything along those lines. So it felt very much like a corporate look and feel from an organization point of view. And essentially they were unable to slice and dice that data when needed, because essentially everybody was in one big bucket of users. So there was no way of actually saying, okay, well, just show me school A or district B or something like that. There was no way of sort of slicing that data down without having to pull off extensive reports and filtering them. They had issues with their existing provider because they felt their use was atypical. So basically when they were asking for a particular use case, they were very much limited on what they could offer in terms of support, because of the fact that they were using it in some kind of unconventional way, because of the different multiple use groups that they have, which we'll come on to a bit later, but essentially they weren't able to support them in the way that something like Moodle Workplace would help them with. They had a real big problem about managing multiple SIS instances, because it caused accounts to be overwritten and sometimes merged without their knowledge. So essentially, if you had the same SIS in two organizations, they both use the same ID numbers, and essentially when they uploaded that file to the site, it assumed it was the other user from the other school. Because of the lack of multi-tenancy, it basically overwrote the data because that data wasn't separated. So Moodle Workplace obviously has that capability of obviously isolating the data, so you're only updating users within one tenant. So certainly made a good choice. And then lastly, they had very much limited reporting capabilities. So essentially, like we said before, around having a lot of administrative features centrally driven meant that they weren't able to obviously offload that capability to senior leaders or principals or superintendents. They would only be able to see the data for the whole site, which obviously wasn't a good idea. So these were their requirements. They came across to us with these 4 sets of requirements. So as we said before, they needed some way of doing multi-tenancy, the ability for different schools to have an isolated tenant without the need of creating their own LMS. Delegation of administrative responsibilities. So this really is about allowing TechTrep to delegate user responsibilities such as reporting, user management, course management, and enrollments from the school. So this really is a case of taking a lot of administrative work from the central pool down into those organizations that need it. The ability for organizations to customize content to meet their needs. So this was a big challenge for them in the fact that they wanted to be able to allow their organizations they work with to customize the content that they had. Whereas before they had one course and everybody accessed that same course, they weren't able to personalize that for that individual organization. So they wanted the ability to be able to offer the courses out in a way that they could still manage, but allow them to delete content that may not be relevant or add content or personalize it for their group of learners. And then lastly, they needed a solution that catered for 3 very distinct use cases. So if we take a quick look at these, we can see we have district schools. So these are mainly where TechTrep were working directly with that school or that district in that multi-tenant approach where they could isolate that data. They needed a way of being able to offer courses to prospects so that they could sell their courses out and be able to obviously offer that. And then the third option, which came in quite late, but essentially the use case here was essentially selling directly to the parents to access a particular course or a single course or entity. So the solution that we came up with, so the solution that was at the forefront of our minds was Moodle Workplace. We felt this was a good fit for them because it was a platform that was flexible enough to cater for all those different use cases, all those different user types, and more importantly, enabled them to grow, enabled the platform to grow with TechTrep as they grow as an organization. The fact that multi-tenancy was a key part of this project left Moodle Workplace as the main option that we had. It allowed them to isolate that data between organizations, but also share some of that common functionality, such as those courses. So they were able to obviously use a base course across multiple organizations without having to spin up a new site each time or anything along those lines. And we also had the ability to do integration. So we needed a way of being able to provide LTI access to the courses. So the courses are not actually stored directly in the platform. The platform is used as a means of accessing that content. The content is stored outside, and we use LTI in order to integrate that within the platform. And then lastly, obviously an integration in terms of e-commerce as well. So a way of selling access to courses was needed in order for the homeschoolers to purchase access. And as we can see here, we've got the multiple role types, so all the different role types that were available, obviously out of the box as well. But you can see here on the right-hand side as well, Moodle Workplace enabled them to offer additional functionality that they didn't think about at the time. So Moodle Workplace comes with a number of different features that they didn't really use, such as programs and certifications, certificates and organizational structure. And really these kind of things enabled them to offer out a little bit more to their clients than what they would have in the first place. Because of the way they wanted to allow them to really use the content in their own way, they could build programs themselves, or they could give custom certificates as much as they wanted. But if we look at those individual use cases, so if we start with the school districts, so in this case, a school district in this use case is a school or organization that has its own tenant and ability to manage their own users, reports and enrollments. And really what we did here, we used the term master tenant, and that master tenant was used to hold all of the courses that are available from TechTrep. When a new tenant is created, or that they have a new tenant come on board, the required courses, it could be a set of courses, it could be all of the courses, are copied from the master tenant into a secondary tenant, essentially. They don't use the shared course functionality. So Moodle Workplace does have a shared course functionality to be able to share that same course across multiple tenants. We actually using backup and restore functionality between tenants in this instance, because of the fact they wanted to be able to create that customized learning path within that organization, and actually give editing rights to those courses within that organization so they can make additional changes. We created a couple of new roles. We created a customized tenant role and a tech mentor role, which is basically allowing the tenant admin allows them to edit the courses and go across all the different things that a tenant may have. And a tech mentor is basically somebody with non-editing rights, but has the ability to manage users and enrollment. Reporting, so in terms of school districts, the key Moodle Workplace functionality that we used in this instance was the fact that they were able to create their own reports as they wanted. So now, instead of having to do it centrally, they were able to obviously use that report builder within Moodle Workplace to create their own reports, and it would only show the data for that tenant they belong to. So they give them some reports out of the box that they set them up with, and then essentially after that, they can build their own reports if they want to. And then lastly, we're able to obviously brand, because we're using Moodle multi-tenancy and the flexibility of using different branding for those different organizations, allowed them to obviously customize it for their individual tenants. And you'll see as well, just slightly underneath the big logo, there's a provided by TechTrep there. We obviously, we can dynamically create different content for there. So we can see here we're using custom CSS for each tenant. So although they have a unique identity with their own logo and images, they still wanted to provide a way of saying that this product is provided by TechTrep. So we're able to do that using some of the Moodle Workplace functionality as well. And as mentioned before, these are some of the added benefits for school districts that they had, which they didn't intend on using, but obviously have that ability to do this now for school districts. So school districts now also have the ability to go in and create their own courses if they want, and they can import from the courses that they already have access to create their own learning path. They can create customized learning pathways using the programs. So for their learners, they're able to obviously build up their own organization structure as they want. And they're also able to use that structure, that organizational structure, for reporting purposes and automatic course allocation. So they can use things like the dynamic rules to be able to automatically allocate new users to all the courses that are available, or there may be a subset of courses that they want to use. There's all different kinds of things that they can now use because they're using Workplace. And essentially they can create their own branded certificates. So they now have that ability, each school has that ability to essentially go in and create a certificate which looks like their own. It may have TechTrep on it, it may not. That really does allow them to be a little bit more flexible than they could have been using their existing provider. The next user group was prospects. So we worked, this is basically an organization which has shown interest but not yet registered with TechTrep. So the key Moodle workplace functionality that we used here is guest access. So we used guest access to the site to allow a guest to be able to see a sample of courses, which each had a password to access. So we're able to obviously log in as a guest, and then you would click on a particular course. And then when you try and access that course, it would ask for a password to enable you to access that course. Because we're using the default tenant for this as well, so all this is housed in that single first tenant, we did do a lot of permission and changes in terms of being able to customize exactly what that role of the guest could see. And we also use some plugins essentially to do that restrict access by role. So that default tenant is used by the homeschoolers as well as the prospects. So we wanted to make sure that we kept them both in a distinct location. And then the last area in terms of the user base or the clients essentially was the individual student who accessed courses that they have purchased via an e-commerce integration. So again, if we think about a homeschooler, they would purchase access to a course via their e-commerce front end and then automatically enrolled onto a course in the Moodle Workplace's default tenant. So a user logs in, we can obviously use any kind of e-commerce front end on this place. This particular one used WordPress and Edwiser Bridge in order to do that integration. But obviously there are many others out there, but because of the APIs that are available in Moodle Workplace, allowed it very easily to integrate with. And it uses that single sign-on nature, so be able to obviously sign in from one side of the site and automatically be enrolled, automatically be signed into the Moodle side as well. So we use permissions for homeschoolers so that they cannot see anything on the guest access side, and they can't even go and browse the categories or see anything else that's in the platform. So the only thing that homeschoolers are able to see are essentially the courses that they have purchased within the e-commerce side. They now have extended some of their functionality, so they're able to use badges within here as well. So when a learner completes a particular course in homeschool, they're able to obviously offer a badge out to them. And they've also started to use family access via that e-commerce front end as well. So they're essentially selling access, 3 or 4 access codes or something like that in order to access that particular site as well. And then if we look at the results, so if we just very quickly look at what we achieved with these guys, essentially the use of the use of Moodle Workplace allowed the business to scale their STEM programs. So the multi-tenancy allows them to house those new clients easily and delegate access, removing the heavy workload from the centralized admin team. By using Moodle Workplace, it offered out a number of extra benefits that other platforms were unable to offer. So if we look at things like multi-tenancy, the improved efficiency, and the platform designed for success and scale. And you can see there a quote from Daniel Bates, basically achieving that particular goal that they were looking at. So overall, they were able to use Moodle Workplace in multiple different ways and not in the standard way that you'd expect. I do have a couple of slides, but I've moved it around a little bit because I was just conscious in case there was any particular questions before I just summarized and finalized the session. So I'll pause for a moment and see if there's any particular questions, Moodle Workplace related, or in fact anything to do with the case study as well, before I move any further.
Ben, maybe I missed it, but what e-commerce solution did they integrate with the Workplace?
Yeah, so these guys actually used they used a WordPress solution on the front end, and they used something called Edwiser Bridge as their integration point. So I don't think it's too expensive. It's quite a cheap e-commerce solution that's available, and it just provides a single way of purchasing a course from one side and enrolling directly into the Moodle Workplace instance from the back end.
Thank you. And you might not know this, but do you have any idea what they charge per course?
I've absolutely no idea, but if you go to the TechTrep online website, I'm sure it will tell you.
All right, thank you.
No problem. And I can see a question from Maddie in terms of what are some additional use cases for multi-tenancy in Moodle Workplace. So essentially, you can use the multi-tenancy features for basically anything that you need to isolate the data for. So in the corporate world, we can use things like extended enterprise as what you would expect. So things like selling access to other organizations within your own platform. You can have you may want to use multi-tenancy for internal training and external training. So we have a couple of organizations that are using that in terms of that split down the middle to say, okay, well, I want all my internal training to be completely separate to the internal training or the external training. There's countless different ways of being able to do that. You can see here that you may have different schools within an organization as well. So it may be the different schools within a university may want their own personalized brand. So you can do that as well. But essentially, anything that you want to be able to slice and dice data with, or isolate data with, or delegate access to use some of the functionality, Moodle Workplace would be great for. Good question, Maddie. Any other questions?
So for the courses and then the participants, or sorry, the prospects access, was there a reason you decided to mix the prospects with sort of your master courses in the default tenant?
Yeah, two reasons. One, because they were essentially the same courses. So it saved obviously adding in another area to do it. But there were some limitations in terms of how that integration point would work from the e-commerce point of view. So that e-commerce point of view needed to be directly integrated with the default tenant. And obviously the guest access made sense to keep in the default tenant because they don't have a particular tenant themselves. So that's the only reason that they were put together. But essentially using those permissions, it effectively isolates them out anyway, so they're not able to see each other and have that ability to provide both use cases in one solution. Thanks, Jeff, for the question. Okay, so quiet bunch this morning. So it's nearly the end of the day for me, so I'm quite alive. So it may be morning coffee time for you guys over there. So I'll move on. I've got a couple more slides, and that's really it. I have finished for the day, so you might get a couple of minutes back today. But essentially, if you want to know more about TechTrep's case study or anything along those lines, you can obviously see it on eThink's Moodle course. So that's essentially there and available for you to go and have a look at. You can go and have a full read of that document. And then just a plug for all our other things that's happening today for the Moot. Go and visit our eThink page, ask a question. You can earn some Moot coins, and there's plenty of resources there to tell you about TechTrep and also what eThink are up to. And we do have some other great sessions today. Adapting to COVID-related challenges with Moodle at Simpson College, which is happening later on today from our very own Claire. So that's all from me. So if there's no last minute questions, we can leave it there for today. But thank you very much for joining. I hope you got something out of this today. I hope you got a little bit more about Moodle Workplace, but do feel free to reach out if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Ben. That was really helpful.
All right.
No problem.
Thanks, Ben. Want to remind everyone, please complete your survey for the session. This helps both the presenter and the conference. And the next item coming up at 9:30 will be a keynote with Jamie Casp. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff.